welcome. My name is Hayden Lee, Master Certified Executive Life and Leadership Coach, and welcome to our Enneagram series. It's been awesome meeting all of our panelists from all the different types, and I'm so excited to meet my Enneagram 7 friends today. Before we do that, I want to remind everyone what the Enneagram is. You know, I like to call the Enneagram a system of self-awareness, and a system of motivation, and really a system of self-liberation. Because what the Enneagram does, it helps us it doesn't put us in a box, it actually helps us expand our box and helps us realize the box we've put ourselves in by tending to have default thinking patterns, feeling patterns, and acting patterns that may actually limit us from being our best self and being our whole authentic selves. And the Enneagram, remember, is all about motivation. It's not about behavior. It goes to the bottom of the iceberg to help us understand why we do what we do, and also help us understand why other people do what they do. So without further ado, let's meet our fabulous Enneagram 7 types today. Enneagram 7, which is often nicknamed the enthusiastic visionary, or sometimes the optimist. The motivation for the 7 is to experience it all and to avoid boredom or pain. So I would love to go around and meet our Enneagram 7s today. If you could just introduce yourselves with your name, where you're from, and a sentence or two about what you do. So who would like to start?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Can't believe it took us all that long to jump in.
Oh my God, 4 quiet 7s. When does that happen?
Yeah.
It's so polite.
It's Sunday. I'm blaming it on Sunday.
Yes.
Oh, mercy. Hey, Hayden and everybody. I am Sarah Albritton. I am an executive coach and a budding intuitive mentor. I am from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And apparently I've been a 7 all my life, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Shelley?
Yes, I'm going to keep muting when I'm not talking because we've got some over enthusiastic. I think we have some enthusiastic visionary dogs across the street. They're quite eager to get in on the conversation. So I'm Shelley Paxton. I am in Chicago, and I am a speaker, writer, speaker, author, and coach as well. I call myself a rebel soul, a liberator of souls, and an author of a book called Soulbatical: A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life.
Nice. Thank you, Shelley.
I'm sorry, liberator of how many souls?
1 billion. Well, not yet, but we're on a path.
Yeah.
You may have surpassed it already. You just don't know.
That's true.
I love you so much.
All right, I'll chime in. My name is David Taylor Klaus, normally connecting in from Atlanta. Right now I'm on a vacation up in North Georgia. The work that I do is best described as reintroducing successful entrepreneurs and senior executives to their families. I do that through a mix of one-to-one coaching for the leader and coaching for the teams they lead. And I got a hint to Enneagram a long time ago from somebody who had no idea what they're doing and just said, take this little online test. So I knew that I was a 7, but until I sat with Hayden for however long we did, I had no idea what that really meant. And so, like Sarah, been a 7 all my life, and it's been instrumental in charting the course of what I am and what I do.
Nice. Cool. Thank you, David. Wendy?
I'm working on getting off mute and getting somewhere where it's not super noisy. My name is Wendy Sorello. Been a 7 all my life as well. I'm in San Diego, California, and I am a curator of magical experiences. So I a little bit of a glorified event planner, primarily for transformational events and leaders.
Nice. Wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. And welcome, everyone. And I heard you all already allude a little bit to, I was always a 7. And yes, the belief of the Enneagram is that you were born a 7 and you will die a 7. It is part of who you are. And there's always, sometimes there's a debate between nature versus nurture. So the nature of it is we were born our type. And the nurture of it is depending on our life experiences and our upbringing is how our behavior manifests itself. So as a 7 whose motivation is to experience everything, avoid boredom, avoid pain, your life experiences maybe, affect your behavior and how that shows up. So also, I want to make the point that the Enneagram is not static. The more you know your core type, the more you can use it as a system, as a roadmap to be able to use your wings and your lines of development, which we'll use today. So that's why I love it, the Enneagram, so much, because it is about developing into your best self. It's not just simply a typing tool like, this is what you are. It's really used to expand. And in reality, all the types are in us. And we want to learn how to, be the best of our type in order to incorporate all the other types inside of us to be truly our best self. So my first question to kick off the discussion is when you first received your results, what were your first reactions reading through it?
I'll go. I know we're all like not eager and eager. So a lot of it was not surprising, but a lot of it was not surprising. But the part that I didn't like was that I overestimate my abilities. That was the one part I was like, oh shit, like oops, we're G-rated. That was the one part that I overestimate my abilities that I kind of knew was true, but had never really been confronted with it like that. And I mean, for me, it was fun to read. It was fun to read. I loved it. And there were some parts of me that I was like, ooh, ow.
Yeah. What part of what was the?
Like,
well, go ahead, David.
well, like Wendy, I had some cringy responses to it when it hit. The vice is gluttony. I was like, oh, ooh, that just shone a light on things that kind of I would avoid being aware of, and it was very helpful in illuminating patterns, and it gave me another way to see where on one hand, it's the instant expert. And on the other hand, it's, wow, I want to dive into everything and dive deep. And it was, where am I balancing those two? Where does it serve and where does it definitely not serve? So I had a very cringy response to pieces of this.
David, I love that you brought this up because I was just talking to Sarah about this yesterday. That bit, I remember, Hayden, when you first were telling me that our virtue is sobriety and our vice is gluttony, and I was just like, oh, like it just landed so deeply. And I know I've enjoyed a cocktail with most of you on this, no, all of you on this call. And yeah, so and I know it just doesn't mean drinking, but like gluttony in life and that hedonism and that indulgence. And I can totally see that pattern in my life. And I can also see the role of sobriety in my life. So that was one that hit me really hard. The other one, Hayden, I don't know if you remember this, but we were doing the deep dive into this together, I believe early on when I was writing the book. It was either early on or right in the middle, and I was struggling. And the thing that felt a bit liberating to me was just really understanding that it's hard for us as 7s to see through these long-term projects and to sit still with something for a very long period of time. And so the book was just like, it was exhausting me to just know I had to keep coming and sitting in front of this computer day after day and showing up. And I was like, when is this going to be done? Like that whole boredom, I'm ready to move on thing was very real.
No, and that to be done is another big piece, because I can get fixated on a piece. The saying is that kindergarten teachers will say every kid's an artist. You just have to know when to take away the paper, right? Because knowing when something's done, I'm not good at that. I will continue to tweak and continue to tweak and continue to tweak, and that's one of the things that I have to ratchet back from. And like Shelley, going through the book process, there was a lot of, how long before I actually said it was done was it really done?
Yeah.
So in another earlier life, I was am still a Myers-Briggs expert. So in reading through all this, I was like, yep. And my preferences on Myers-Briggs are ENTP. And I don't know if anybody else has done that here, if anyone else resonates with that as well. So from I can imagine some people who've never done any of this work reading this would be, how did you get in my head? And have you been paying rent? And, you know, who are you people and how did you get there? Having done this work all my life, I didn't have that experience. But what was really kind of cool for me at this age is realizing, oh, yeah, that used to be true. Oh, yeah. You know, or, oh, I learned to do that. Like the self-talk, I deserve what I deserve what I want. That's a learned thing for me. And the whole gluttony piece, just really, Shelley, based on what you just said, realizing in the last gasp of my first marriage, we were having people over to our house 5 nights a week. And it was like, how many different ways can I run from, and I thought we were just having a good time, you know, but how many different ways can I run from the reality of, you know, a nice guy, but just a dead relationship from a romantic sense. So it was really fun to kind of read through and think, hey, no, really? I don't, well, and come to terms with myself and get a little squidgy about it from time to time.
Nice. Thank you, Sarah. What I'm already realizing talking to these magnificent sevens is everyone in this group, you know, is passionate about personal development and professional development. So already I can see that there's a higher level of integration, you know, with this group than maybe an average group of sevens. What integration means in the Enneagram world is the ability to be able to use your self-awareness and use all parts of you. Like Sarah was saying, is like maybe in the younger version of herself in her early 20s, it would have been different than she is now as a seven. But I love that we're already diving in to some of the darker parts of the seven, because usually sevens avoid boredom, avoid pain, and reframe. Expert reframers, right? But as Sarah was saying, like this, throwing these parties every night, you know, now she can see that maybe he was avoiding something that was right in front of her face, right? Maybe the relationship wasn't working, but let's keep on throwing parties. You know, maybe that will help. So tell us all about this we call it the feeling of the seven is sometimes being uncomfortable with pain or discomfort. So then they'll reframe it to make themselves feel better, or rationalize it to make them feel better, and distract themselves. So Shelley, how's that land for you?
Oh my God, I built a whole career on it. 26 years in the corporate world. And I was like, okay, well, if I've got to tough it out in this thing that doesn't really give me my freedom, right? And freedom is the core of who we are as sevens, then I'm going to make it as fun as possible. I'm going to make this career trajectory an adventure. And so I moved over to Istanbul, Turkey, and stayed there for 4 years, and then went and lived in New York City, and then, you know, went over to Shanghai, China. I literally used my career as a round the world ticket, and worked for some of the most incredible brands. I rode motorcycles around the world on Harley Davidson, which I happen to have one of my t-shirts on today. So it's interesting. That was it for me. And I realized that was my way of totally and completely not getting to the root of the issue and just saying, well, then I'm going to create. If this is where I should be, because I was using the should word a lot, then I'm going to make this as fun as possible. And so, yeah, story of my career up until 4 years ago.
I love that.
Yeah. And
I mean,
for me,
I just want to highlight, though, of course, fun, adventure, and spontaneity are all part of the seven. And to find the fun and spontaneity, even in parts of life that are not working, but to make it fun instead of head on directly addressing the issue. Yeah, go ahead, DTK.
Yeah, and for me, it was exhausting my team. I was building a company through the lens of what I thought was expected. In other words, I was shoulding, like as Shelley was describing. But instead of moving all over the planet, I would come up with these new initiatives and new ideas and things we could do for the company. It's like I would come back from my monthly peer group meeting, and it was amazing how everybody in the office was sick for the next 2 days. It was just, they were exhausted with all the ideas that I was bringing to keep it fresh and alive for me, to put that lipstick on that pig and try to make it something engaging for me. And I was wearing them out completely. But I was entertained.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Wendy, Sarah? I was thinking about that same metaphor, putting lipstick on the pig. You know, the sevens are great at having that pig being so pretty and so much lipstick and glitter and eyeshadow, yet it's still that pig. So yeah, Wendy?
Well, I think it's also my 100% putting lipstick on a pig. Great at it. And for me, it was more like I fooled myself as much as I fooled everybody else. Like I was great at convincing myself it was great and it was fun and it was working and it was exactly what I wanted. And so I think that was I was my own biggest saboteur, or not saboteur, like fool. Like I convinced myself, and it was way more comfortable to be in denial and have a great, like, all fun again, like lots and lots going on, than to like really sink into the reality of like, oh wow, this is bad. So, and my truth is also, I never, like, it got so bad out of my own control. Like I never pulled the trigger. I was committed to it being good and fun and pretty and so until I couldn't anymore. So that was the old, that was before. I won't do that again, I think.
Yeah, so dark side, bright side. When I did decide to leave my marriage, my son, who was 15 at the time, a couple years later, we were walking and he said, I never thought I'd be glad that you and Dad split up. I was like, okay. And he said, but here's the thing. When you decided to get real, he said, we were in danger of becoming the perfect family. And that's how we put it. We were in danger of becoming the perfect family. And I think that's the lipstick on the pig side of it. And he said, when you decided to get real, you made room for the rest of us to get real. And I don't know that we'll ever be able to thank you for that. So, bright side, dark side of all that. Now, there is a flexibility and a fluidity that comes with things too. As I'm telling this story, I'm thinking maybe this should have been my first sign. When at my wedding, one of the bridesmaids comes up. I mean, we're all dressed. We're across the street from the church. We're ready to rock and roll. And one of the bridesmaids comes up and says, we're short a bouquet. And I'm like, wait, what? We're short a bouquet. About that time, a groomsman comes up. We're short a boutonniere. And like that, I took away another bouquet, made single stems for the maid and matron of honor to carry, fixed a boutonniere, was like, go, 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 and it looked beautiful. And for years, that became de rigueur at the weddings in Northern Virginia to have single stem flowers held by the maid and matron of honor. So yeah, it was lipstick on a pig, but it turned out to be pretty good.
Oh my God, Sarah, I love the reframe that you just did in front of our faces.
Yep.
I love it.
Welcome.
There was the reframe. It started with the story of a bad marriage and ended up into how you set the trend for wedding flowers, which is awesome. It is definitely, ladies and gentlemen, we saw before our eyes the gift of the 7 to start, to take a bad situation and make it into something positive, which I think is a great gift, right? But it can become the blind spot too. It become the blind spot of the 7, like the expert reframer, the expert able to rationalize. Oh, look, we got Elaine in the picture. Able to rationalize negative emotions, negative feelings. But when it ends up being a blind spot, it could leave 7s incomplete or not whole, because they're just focusing on the positive. They're just avoiding that negative emotion, avoiding that screaming elephant in the room. So Sarah, you want to add to that? Right?
We might be really good at putting a veneer on things, but we know that it's just a veneer.
Exactly.
And that's a draining energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to say, can I just jump in? I used to say that I think only 5 years ago, woke up to this idea that success and fulfillment are not mutually exclusive. And I put lipstick on that pig for 26 years, probably longer than that, until I finally listened to myself, had this nightmare that was ripping me out of my sleep and forced me to reconcile with the fact that I was living completely out of alignment with my truth.
Yeah.
And those were some dark days.
And I became an entrepreneur at 28. I was like done with or maybe it was, I don't know. Anyway, somewhere in there, I was done with, organizational life.
Yeah. I mean, that's, like I said, great insight, from all of you. All of us are in that space already of development. But, I think all of you are recognizing the sevens, who are awesome, by the way, right? So fun, spontaneous, adventurous, but there's that keeping yourselves busy to distract you from the truth, right? Which is the hard truth. Yeah. Shelley, you wanted to add something?
No, that I have said busyness has been one of my biggest addictions to kick. Honestly, I think busyness is how I kept myself numb and how I kept, that was my lipstick for a long time.
Yeah. And it's funny how you use the word numb, because it does make me think of the vice and the virtue, right? The vice of the seven is gluttony, which could be gluttony of experiences, gluttony of making connections, just excess, just piling things on. Whereas the vice is sobriety, and not necessarily sober from drugs and alcohol, but the sobriety of being woke, like clear-headed, awake, honest with oneself, seeing things clearly. And as Shelley's saying, her addictedness was being busy, because it kept her numb, just like alcohol does to one, right? It keeps you numb from seeing the sober truth, right?
And the combination of the two was awesome.
Addicted to busyness and addicted to cocktails. Yes, that could be fun.
Your next book title, Shelley, The Busy Drunk.
Yes.
That's so good. I love it.
Well, traveling the world.
Or how to write a book.
Well, yeah. I was saying traveling the world, being busy in your corporate career, but hitting up every hotel bar. I mean, that sounds fun. I want to I can have cocktails in Hong Kong and Singapore and in London. Well,
And
not
I
thinking
did.
about,
Yeah. Anyway.
So something I also want to talk about, though, is, the Enneagram, it has 3 centers. There's an action center, a feeling center, and a thinking center. So the action center is types 8, 9, and 1. And they tend to struggle something with anger. And then types 2, 3, and 4 is the feeling center. And they have some sort of like struggle with sadness or shame and self-worth. And types 5, 6, and 7 sit in the thinking center, and they struggle with fear. And so how does that land with you? Like I said, I think sevens are very positive and optimistic, and one might not see that there's that underlying fear of something, and one might not think that the 7 is in the thinking center because they often are very busy. But sevens' minds are very active, like imagination, creativity. Their minds are always thinking of the next step ahead, and it stems from fear, some sort of relationship with fear. How does that all land with you?
Well, I was surprised that it was a thinking, like that was the primary place until you explain it like that. Like, right, because I feel like I feel things. Like I feel like I really feel things. And I also am, I mean, there is a huge bias for action, right? Like there's the doing. But when you explain it like that, it actually all does come from, this very busy, very active, very imaginative, very creative thing going on up here. It just, it feels like I manifest in the world, not in here, if that makes sense.
Actually, let me add to that. It does make sense, because I do want to make a distinction. 7, the type 7 comes from the thinking center place, but as individuals, the thinking center might not be your highest center of expression, right? Because I think a few of you are feeling center forward, but you still, the 7 type comes from the thinking center. So so you may lead with feelings. I know for a fact DTK's thinking center is higher than his other centers, but the 7ness is from the feeling of fear in some way, fear of missing out, fear of being trapped, fear of being controlled. So that fear is there, and then and independent of that fear, you could be high action center, high feeling center, or high thinking center. So that's independent of the fact that 7 comes from that fear place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that I struggle with as well, because I'm super high on the feeling, action, and thinking. and I get the fear as a construct. And when I feel fear, I don't feel it in my body. I feel it here. I vibrate. It's super uncomfortable. But everything I do leads from that feeling center. And so it was uncomfortable looking at that. It makes sense. But hearing the description of the fear coming from here, as you described, it makes a lot of sense now. Yeah, that was super helpful.
Yeah, I like that too. I think I was confused as I was just looking at mine, and I am also like highest in terms of feeling and then action and then thinking. So I think DTK, same thing, right? And I didn't totally understand that until just now. And honestly, the other thing that just came to me, Hayden, is you offered up that really powerful description is, I think for the longest time, I had a fear of, one, being honest with myself, and certainly a fear of others seeing my true self, a fear of showing or sharing what was really going on inside. So I kind of had this perfectly polished, armored up exterior, and a fear of me even understanding it, let alone sharing it, which is why I kind of wrote the really raw and vulnerable book I did, because that's the journey I've been on. So now I kind of understand it better.
That really hits something remarkable about Enneagram. And I know this isn't necessarily a commercial for Enneagram, but each time that we've had a conversation about it, and I imagine for people, each of you that's been in this panel, and every time I've gone back to read through more or to read some of the books that Aiden's recommended, this just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. The rabbit hole is super deep, and I learn something more about it or connect with something more about it each time I go through it. Okay, so as a 7 with the instant expert syndrome, yeah, that's kind of frustrating about this. You know, I want to know it, but then every time I go back in, there's more. So that's been a fascinating experience as I digest this.
Yeah, so this whole fear thing, struggle's not the right word. I'm playing with it, I guess. There's my lipstick. And I think two big fears. One is the whole missing out thing that I guess is almost a caricature of 7. And it's not, I mean, sometimes it's missing out on the fun, sometimes it's missing out on connection. And sometimes it's like missing out on some superlative, being my best, being the best, figuring it out, just being out front, whatever all that is. But Shelley, as I was listening to you again, I was thinking back around one of my biggest struggles. I landed in the process of this divorce, and this is ancient history, but I landed at a 7-day silent retreat by accident. I didn't know that's what it was. But what I got really up close with really fast was I was afraid of what I would hear. And if I heard what I was pretty sure I would hear, how am I going to dismantle the shiny armor of, air quote, the perfect family, as my son described it? Because I had the world bought in on this lifestyle and the whole thing. And so, yeah, so that was a deep fear. I really learned a lot from that whole experience. And as a coach, it made me able to spot other people who are faking too.
Yeah, helps you hone your intuition. I think you may have all heard me share this story before, but you know, there was that psychology experiment, right, where people can get to choose to sit in silence for 15 minutes with their thoughts, or they can get a cash prize. So it's literally just sit there in silence with their thoughts, think about their life, or they can get it after 15 minutes. If they succeed in that, they get a cash prize. The only action they can do is they can push a lever that will electrically shock them. You know, the majority of people push the lever. The majority of people could not sit in silence with their own thoughts for 15 minutes. They'd rather push the lever, sacrifice the money prize. it's a little bit of what Sarah was saying is that, she went to the silent retreat and the fear was, God, what am I really going to uncover? What am I really going to, see in myself? And that's very scary. And I want to say, remember 5, 6, and 7s live in the, come from the thinking center, right? Which is different, which is separate than whether or not they show up in thinking or not, right? We uncovered that. But the 5, 6, and 7's relationship with the fear and relationship with how they think shows up differently. The 5's thinking and fear energy is inward, right? Think of the 5s we know. The 5 is very introspective, very great at being quiet, very great at taking it all in internally. The 6's relationship with fear and thinking is, we call it confused or contradictory. It's in and out, right? Because a fear is, do I want to do it or do I not? Do I trust this person or do not? Like, am I afraid or am I not? The 7's relationship with thinking, it's external, right? It's not taking time to think in here. It's like, well, these are the things I want to do. What about this possibility? What about this? I want to do this. I want to do this. Future thinking, future forward. So that's really fascinating too, that 5, 6, and 7's have some relationship with fear and they're thinking, but it's in a different way. Like the 7's may not even know there's a fear there, but this idea of thinking about what's next, thinking about what's possible. It is a fear of reflecting on what's happening in the present, to be honest with oneself as to what is happening now. I don't want to think about it, so I'm going to think about what's next. Yeah, DTK.
So what, we soothe ourselves with action?
Or yes, you soothe yourself with action, which is the gluttony, right? So the vice is a fixation that we tend to get into, and fixation means a default way of thinking, acting, and behaving that prevents you from being your whole self, right? So soothing yourself with action, as DTK said, 7 sometimes can be notorious for having breadth of knowledge, not depth of knowledge, right? So it's like, all right, let me try the next thing. Let me take this course. Let me take this seminar. Let me read this book. And then oftentimes you may have many books that may be unfinished on your nightstand because you want to just, try lots of different things. And I love how you said soothe, and that's coming from a little bit of the feeling center, right? Because you're a feeling center person. That word soothe is a very emotive word, right? Did you want to say something, Shelley?
No, I was just mining my giant stack of books that are half read. I was totally relating to that point because this is the quintessential 7. I get bored really easily. I want to move on to the next thing or the new thing or the shiny thing, or I still find myself doing that on a regular basis. So, and I'm a voracious reader, and I realized it's like this again was the challenge in me writing a book. I was like, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Is it done yet? I have a hard time sitting still with something for that long.
It's the voracious starter.
Yeah, and the really sucky follow through. Yeah.
I have an instant expert story. Before the days of internet, I had a gig. It was one of my first sort of corporate gigs, and it was on strategic planning or something. And I can't remember how they found me and my business partner at the time, but they did. And I was kind of out of my depth, and had dropped my son off at Montessori, and had turned on the radio, and it was partway through an interview with an author on a book on strategic planning. So I pull over in the parking lot, and I'm scratching down notes and stuff. We didn't even have cell phones then, scratching down notes and everything. And so I get home and I call my business partner. I'm like, okay, I've got the 2-day workshop planned. Here's what we're going to do. Bam, 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 bam. He's like, wow, that's great. And I found the author, and so fast forward a couple months, we were doing the workshop, and I stood up and did my piece, and I come back and there's a note from my business partner. It says, well done. It's almost as if you read the book.
Be honest here, 7s. How many of you actually read your Enneagram report from beginning to end? Oh, every page?
Last night, yeah.
Well, I'll be honest, not in the first sitting. I came back and played with it several times.
Yeah, if I chunked it out?
Me too. But I'll admit that I also, I pulled my printout again this morning, and I was like, oh, I was realizing I probably haven't actually spent enough time with it because I even started circling things. I'm like, Oh, I didn't remember that. Okay, this is interesting. I'm like, Jesus, Shelley, like.
Oh, there's exercises in there.
No.
What she
Oh,
said.
wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, with something that's actually really even more interesting, as DTK was saying, the more you learn about the Enneagram, the more layers and layers there is. And another layer is there's actually different types of 7 in this room, right? Because in reality, there's actually 27 Enneagram types, because within each core type, there's 3 instincts. And within so your core type, which all of you are 7, matched with your instinct becomes your subtype. So each of the 9 types has a dominant instinct. So the 3 instincts are self-preservation, one-to-one, and social. And what that means is the self-preservation instinct is this idea of, looking after one's needs first, right? One's own material safety, physical safety, pretty good with boundaries. The one-to-one is having intense relationships with certain people, having intense experiences, and really, really loving to connect with certain folks. The social 7, or the social instinct, is about belonging to the group, being aware of social hierarchy, and being able to navigate around a group. So we don't have any social 7s in this group right now. And the social 7 is a counter type. The counter type is the one type which acts differently than the other types. So yeah, this is another nuance of the Enneagram. So each of the 9 types has a counter type. So the social 7 is a counter type because the social 7 is about sacrifice. So the motivation stays the same between all 3 types, but the social 7 acts the least like the other types because he or she is about sacrificing for the group and still wanting to experience it all, still avoiding pain and discomfort. But the social 7's way of avoiding pain and discomfort is focusing on the group, doing what's good for the group. And the one-to-one 7s we have 3 of, Shelley, Sarah, and DTK is the one-to-one 7. The one-to-one 7 tends to be the most romantic of the 7s, like really great at wearing rose-colored glasses, really great at the reframe, really imaginative, and they escape pain and boredom by escaping into their imagination, really dreaming about what's possible. And Wendy is the self-preservation 7. Remember, the motivation of wanting to experience it all is still the same, but Wendy as a self-preservation 7 might have a little bit better boundaries than the other 7s, right? In order, like Wendy being able to attune to her own needs, being able to, focus on her own needs. But however, as a self-preservation 7, her own needs are about experiencing it all. So she is not afraid to be like, well, I'm going to do this. That gluttony still can happen for a self-preservation 7 to pile it on with things she wants to do, but it comes from a place of taking care of herself. Whereas a one-to-one 7, the ones who romanticize with the rose-colored glasses, they still want to experience everything, but they also really want to connect with certain people and experience that experience with shared experience is a lot more important. So how does that all land with you that we have the self-preservation? Well, let me go to Wendy first. When you heard about that self-preservation instinct, how does that land with you?
Well, again, like on the surface, I was surprised. Like on the surface, like at the surface level, I'm like, oh, I'm a social. Like, but I wouldn't say I was counter. I would just say I just want more people all the time. Like, let's just do people. And then that need for connection. I was actually really surprised to be a self-preservation, except for like if I get immobilized when I don't feel a certain level of security. I mean, pick your lane of what security means in any given moment. But like, I can't, like there's a financial security piece where if I don't have it, I can't be creative. I just want to, all my energy goes to get to that like ground zero of then being able to move. Same thing in social settings. Like, I mean, I can work a room, but if I don't feel safe in a room, like I'm out, like I'm out. So I'm like, oh, it is all about me.
Well, it is, and I love how you said material financial security is important too, and the fact that you said security is important. That's self-preservation,
Right?
And I want to make the distinction: the social instinct does not mean extroverted and social. It means the ability to know about social hierarchy,
Right.
have an instinct of belonging, and know who's who in a room. So with that said, Wendy, you're all very social. You're all very sociable. but it's interesting how, Wendy, you even said you know how to work a room, because one of the things that the self-preservation 7 is able to do is know who to build alliances with to fulfill your needs.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is all about you. It's like knowing who to network with
It's so
in order
bad.
to give you, it's not all so
It
bad. I mean,
doesn't feel good, but it is, but it's
yeah,
true. I mean,
it's not about good or bad. It's about, think about the biological instincts of survival. That's where it comes from.
yeah.
We all need to, one, look out for our own needs. Two, find partners to mate with, to, have a guarantee of the evolution of your species. And three, we also need to know how to get along with the group. So that's where it comes from. And we all have the instincts in us, but it's just that we tend to have a dominant instinct. So it's just fascinating that we're all 7s, but there's the nuance of your instinct has you show up all a little in a different way. Yeah. So what about our 1-to-1 7s? How's that land with you? That creativity, imagination, romanticizing, wanting to connect with certain people, have shared experiences. Yeah, DTK?
Yes, it fits. And so I looked at these types at the beginning, and I was surprised that I wasn't a subtype social, because that felt to me more the way I look at the world. But it's, as you describe it today, and I sort of try to deconstruct it as you go, it makes sense that intense bond and loyalty almost to a fault, and the always moving towards the more intense relationship and relationship style, it sort of matches that whole stimulation seeking side. And yet it was still a surprise.
Yeah.
I have to say, I wasn't surprised at all to be a 1-to-1. This is a piece of the original debrief that I didn't remember. And so when I was reading this again, I was like, oh yeah, that fits. Because had you asked me outside of this, like, how would you characterize your engagements? I would always say, I seek relationships on all levels with depth and intensity. 1000%. And so when I was rereading that, I'm like, oh, boom. Yeah. Like that's one that just feels like fits like a glove.
Yeah, that fits for me too. And at this point in my life, I would say that I am open to lots of ideas and open to hearing about a lot of different things. The gullible piece has had its learning over the years. So I don't feel as gullible, and I forbid anyone to call me a Pollyanna anymore. I used to call myself a Pollyanna and had a really, really knockdown drag out with somebody who I used to trust about it. And that was the insult from his perspective that he threw at me. And I looked at that situation and what the issue was and thought, no, this is not about me being a Pollyanna. This is about me living my values, and, you living in fear, me living in abundance. And that is, I refuse that label from here forward. Am I open-minded? Yes. Am I engaged with a lot of ideas? Yes. I will talk about a lot of ideas with anybody. I no longer, maybe it's a choosing, but I no longer choose to see myself as gullible.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I mean, well, with life experience, right? Once again, with, the experience, but yes, sometimes a blind spot for 7s is, could be, saying yes and wanting all this experience, and maybe not being as discerning as they could be, to choosing what experiences to involve in. Two things. So something else I wanted to say is the 1-to-1 type, 1-to-1 subtype, the 7 tends to communicate through like stories and pictures, which so Sarah's already told us like a couple stories today, and I love it. Like, absolutely 7s love to, communicate through, their imagination and creativity. And two, I'm curious now, with Sarah talking about rejecting the Pollyanna stereotype, is I heard this in my Enneagram class from another 7, how he had a fear, how sometimes as a 7 that he may be viewed as lack of substance, or as, because I'm so fun and positive all the time, like a lack of depth. Does that ever come up for you all, like, that lack of substance, or seen as someone maybe flighty or lack of substance? Yeah, Sarah?
Yeah, it certainly used to, and it can raise its head from time to time, but that is a particular area over the last 3 or 4 years that I've done significant deep work on to release that.
Nice.
Well, I think as a very early on, I worked overtime to prove or to show that I was like intelligent and I mean, grounded would be the wrong word. I don't think I worked overtime to show that I was grounded, but I really wanted to prove that I was smart and that I could hold my own and that and so I guess, yeah, I mean, I've let, I think being 50, you let a little bit of that, like, okay, like buy in or don't, but it showed up really early for me. Like, I'll prove to you, I will be the smart one. I will be, again, hold my own and have the intelligent conversation, whether I really lit me up or not. Like, like it wasn't the funnest thing to do, but very committed, very young.
Nice. DTK, I saw you nod your head earlier when you said that resonated with you too.
Yeah, it did. Again, it was another piece that began to settle as I've gone deeper into this.
Shelley, anything to add about that fear of not being of substance or not taken seriously?
Yeah, what's been interesting for me, kind of like Sarah, I've done a lot of work on this over the past like 4 years since I walked away from Harley. I've been on this sabbatical, and what's been interesting to realize, and I didn't even see this until just now, is I always thought that I was like, that people were seeing my depth. I thought I was working really hard to show that there was more there. And I was like, I was just the sandwich board of my titles and all of this shiny armor. And I think I thought I was doing it, but I couldn't have been doing it because I wasn't being honest with myself. So I wasn't even aware of that depth to bring it forward. And now I'm only realizing that people see that now because it's what I lead with. And it took a lot of work to get to that place. So yeah, I'm guessing there was a lot of fear around that, but I think I was fooling myself. Again, like we've been talking about, another example of how it's like, oh no, people get it. Like, I'm deep, I'm this, I'm that. And it's like, no, how could they have known that? I wasn't even honest with myself.
That I feels like an important question around that, because I think like I was one of those people that didn't really like I think I didn't really do like deep friendships as a young person, even, good Lord, into my 30s, as particularly with women, and definitely not in my first marriage. And so it's like, oh wait, like is it like the, I mean, inherently, I don't know, like, do we have to like a bigger learning curve to attain that ability to go deep and to feel deeply and to be in deep relationships as sevens? Like, it's like a propensity to, we're going to hold it off until we learn and are motivated to like go there? Or is that just my experience? Like, I had to consciously want it.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Well, the fact that you're asking this question is already a good reflection that, that's the first step, is awareness, right? Because I think, unhealthy sevens who may be in that blind spot, not even being aware that they don't have deep relationships because
100%.
they're not even aware that, and there's two layers to two types of depth too. There's depth of knowledge externally, but there's also depth of knowing oneself. So when the sevens don't have depth of knowing oneself, they may not even realize that they have superficial relationships with friends. They might not even know because they're going through the motions, but it's fun, and they're distracted by the fun and positivity. Like, let's go out to happy hour every night with my friends, and this is life. But is that really deep friendship?
But is that a seven thing? Like that flavor of, I mean, it has definitely been, it was my experience like for a long time. And it was a steep, laborious learning curve to like, first of all, be aware that sucks. and then to like, and realize there's nothing, you know, there's very little. And then to
Well,
like
yeah.
build back up felt, I mean, like a lot of work. But I'm wondering if that's a 7 flavor or is that just like life?
Well, I mean, I think it could be a 7 flavor. I mean, I don't want to like, stereotype, but if we were to kind of label typical behaviors, that could be a more 7 than a 4, for example, because a
Right.
4's motivation is all about deep, intense, authentic relationships. So a 4's on a quest to have a deep and
Right.
meaningful friendships, whereas a 7's default isn't a quest for deep, meaningful relationships. It's more about experiencing lots of different fun things and finding people to do those things with. But like I said, with the work, every type has the capability to be amazing leaders and have the ability to have amazing deep relationships.
Yeah.
But with that said, Wendy, I think it's a good segue into our last. Oh, you had a question, Sarah? Yeah. Or a
Well, I
comment?
was just going to say, the nature nurture example. So as a 7, I grew up on a 500-acre farm in the middle of nowhere. And so I think that was formative in terms of even as a 7, my capacity to be with myself and to be with, I had one friend from church who also went to the elementary school that was 40 minutes away, and she's much quieter, much more contemplative. She's now an artist. And I'm looking back due to this conversation thinking, wow, that was probably pretty formative for me to have the experience early, even as a 7, of going deep in order to have any connection at all.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And I can imagine being a youngster without, you know, living in the middle of nowhere, your imagination even comes into play even more, right? Because as a 1-to-1 7, you have such vivid, active imaginations, and being a little girl without like lots of distraction, and you might have to use your imagination even more than if you lived in a
Lots of
bustling
stuffed
city.
animals.
Yeah, well, I can totally see little Sarah, making up for little games with her stuffed animals. That's so cute. Well, the last thing I want to go over is the lines of development. So with the 7, there's 2 lines of development. There's line to the 1 and the line to the 5, right? And these lines are where you can develop into the best of the 7 and the best of your type. So the 5 is the quiet specialist, right? So the 5 is the one who looks at depth of knowledge, right? And being really deep with introspection, right? Very inward facing, very inward looking, right? The 5's motivation is to understand. So kind of taking time, like Wendy was saying, like she didn't really, take time to think about, oh, a lot of my friendships aren't that deep, but a 5 would, kind of really looking at things in an objective way. Like to really analyze things. How are my relationships? Like, as a 5, they may very much rate it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how deep are my relationships? Like a 5 is very good at that, to be able to be compartmentalize, like, take their emotions out of seeing things. So that's one line is 7 to 5. The other line is 7 to 1, where 1 is the perfectionist, to be able to have discipline and focus and structure and follow through, which may be scary for a 7, because a 1 is all about limits, is all about boundaries, and all about, following through, high attention to detail, high follow through. But here's another nuance though. So both of those lines are important to help you step into your 1 and to step into your 5. But there's this idea of stretch and release, which is another nuance of the Enneagram. So what does that mean? So like I said, stepping into 1 and stepping into your 5 are great development for 7s. But there's also this notion of the release line is when you are in high strain and there's a lot going on in your life, high stress, high strain, you actually might need to release to the 5, which is releasing stress, releasing strain. So it's like actively and intentionally stepping into your 5 for quiet time and reflection to reach that equilibrium of feeling like, all right, I feel like myself again. Then you can stretch into your 1, which is really finish that project, really show structure and discipline. But if you're really high strain and stress in your life and you don't release into that 5 energy to just have quiet time and to think deeply by yourself, you won't even be able to stretch to your best 1. Does that kind of make sense? I think sometimes it's like, you know, all of you as a 7 intuitively, you know, oh, I know I need to follow through. I need to stretch to my 1. But if you're at a place in your life where you're just so much is bottled up, you won't even be able to do it unless you go to your 5 first. Yeah, DTK.
When we went through this, one of the things I noticed on the section right before this in the report is I'm in high strain, right? And so what struck out for me in the 5 release was this piece. This is the point of slowing down enough to get involved with things in depth. Release happens when you internalize your experiences. And that one landed hard. It was like the last thing we talked about. But that's a piece that I really took. And I think, Shelley, we even talked about this. The last stages of the book, the part where it feels like you're at the baton death march of detail. And that was the only way to get through it, was to pause and intentionally choose to be still and be with it. It's the only way I got through. And that was because of this awareness. So I keep this piece of the report in front of me, particularly the release to the 5, not the stretch to the 1. So that's been super helpful as things get complicated. I didn't play with the stretch as much.
Well, and also sometimes the release comes a little easier, right? As DTK is saying, it's like, that's why it's called the release. It's there's a sigh almost of, taking that time to relax, taking that time to really think deeply. But there comes to a point where you do need to stretch to the 1 to provoke deeper change and to really grow. Yeah, Shelley.
Well, to come full circle, this is exactly what you and I talked about. This is the thing that stood out to me the most because I was in the midst of book writing. And I remember talking about the 1 in particular. And really, I love DTK that you said that. It's like, because I was just like, oh my God, I don't even know where to find a perfectionist inside of me. Like, I just don't know. Like, I just keep rolling with it and making shit up and all the things. But I really did get it. And I think it was that acknowledgement that it's okay to go to this 5, like, because I was feeling so stressed and so strained about writing and the deadline that was looming and all the things. And it was just like permission to just sit and relax and do something that fueled my soul, be quiet, and then get back in and really set those goals, those deadlines, those boundaries to, once I'm a little bit more refueled. It was a good reminder. And I honestly felt like I needed the permission, because to go to the 1 right away felt like complete overwhelm to me. So I like how those 2 play off of each other.
Yeah. DTK.
You get the slingshot. By going to 5, you can slingshot to the 1. Maybe that's what I try next.
Yep. The 5 also, another metaphor is the 5 kind of helps you refill your cup in order to be able to stretch and do the harder work, right?
How about that?
The soul fuel.
Yeah, I would say that the work with my intuitive coach and the work that I find myself now doing with new clients is around living in the 5 space more comfortably and honoring and acknowledging soul information and soul language that you can only get to when you've had a chance to be quiet. And is it awful that I feel like I've hired a 1 to do the 1? It feels like progress, actually, because I now see the reason that I am able now to work with I call her my administrative angel, is because rather than hate all that stuff, I have recognized the importance of it and really value and allow her to take over that part of life. Am I avoiding a developmental experience?
No, not at all, actually. I mean, I think well, here's 2 things. We don't use the Enneagram just on the sole basis of hiring. We don't want to do that because it's about motivation, not behavior. So because I mean,
I have no idea if she's a 1. I just know that that's she serves for me.
Yeah. But in the sense of, I mean, 1s love administrative tasks. They love that attention to detail. But with that said, yes, sometimes it's good to outsource, things that you don't like to do. But on the same token, there's great stretches in your 1 in order for the freedom that you seek. to seek, because that's the thing too, is I think sevens love freedom, and the true key to freedom in many aspects is follow through. It's finishing which you set to do will actually set you free. Like the boundaries and limitations that you avoid are actually the ones that will actually help you grow and give you freedom. Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, if, I mean, Shelley and DTK with your books, you know, being completed, you're free rather than thinking about being trapped by that book if you didn't finish it. Like, imagine that, like not finishing it is even more trapping than sitting down to actually finish it. Yeah.
That's really, really helpful.
Yeah. Wendy, anything to add about the lines of 1 to 5, 1 and 5? Yeah.
Well, I feel like, I mean, I'm like looking at this. It's so fascinating how, like, where everybody's lines go, you know, all the different Enneagrams, some of them go right next to each other.
Yeah.
And, like, I feel like I am at a place where I definitely need to stretch more into both, but not because I'm under, like, I don't feel like I'm in a pressure cooker. And I actually think I'll be even better if I just do it without the like urgency and like the necessity. I think it'll be it'll be amazing. Like, I'm like, oh, really, truly. It's not the one that, I mean, definitely that's a stretch, but it's the 5 that's the biggest challenge for me. And it's not that I don't have time. I just don't carve out the 5 time.
And there doesn't need to be urgency. Right? I think
I know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, it's like, I'm here, you know, the book felt like, I'm like that, those guys, it's like urgent. I'm like, yeah, but wow, what if I did it without being urgent?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
So that when I did get urgent, it was maybe a little easier, but.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, and one of the things that I know is true for me is, and I was reminded reading this, and I think my kids would tell you too, is I don't care about details until I care about details. Yeah. And when I start caring about details.
Oops, you muted, your last sentence was muted.
So I don't care about details until I care about them. And when I care about them, they better be right or heads are going to roll. I mean, it's just like,
ding, ding.
Yeah.
I mean, I had literally just yesterday, I shipped a gift to a client in Canada and got a note, you know, and paid good money to do it. Got a note saying, hey, did you ship me something? Like, yes. Okay, well, it's at the border and I now have to pay import fees. And I'm like, wait, what? You know, I took myself all the way to the UPS store. I found your address. I shipped it. I put a card in it and I was just out of my mind. It's like, so, wow. And then I read this report an hour later. I thought, okay, yeah, that's what that is.
Well, on that note, you know, we're going to start wrapping things up, but that's a great story because obviously with our lines to 1 and 5, we want to be the best of the 1 and 5, right? We don't want to scoop up some of the worst behaviors of those types because you're right. The 1, remember the 1 sits in the anger center, right? So 1's in an unhealthy level. If things don't go as planned, if people don't meet their high standards, as Sarah says, heads can roll, right? So we do want to be conscious.
That is?
Well,
everybody explains so much.
Well, we also didn't even get in. We also didn't even get into wings. Remember, because 7s have an 8 wing, and the 8 wing is the controller, and also the 8 wing sits in the anger center, and the 8 wing, when things don't go his or her way, heads can roll too. So although 7s are rosy and positive and optimistic, there are ways to get 7s to bring out the claws. So, yeah.
I am optimistic that they will feel pain.
Yes, absolutely.
And understand why.
Yes. But with that said, this has been lovely. You know, this has been so much fun. So I want to go around, you know, one last time. What are your final things? What do you want people to know about being a 7, or what do you want to say why you love being a 7, or what is your final 7 sentence that you would love to share with the world, and what you want others maybe to know about the true essence of a 7? Who would like to go?
So what comes up for me as you asked, this is the download, it's lean in and enjoy. The rabbit hole's deep and it's fantastic.
Nice. Love it. Thank you.
I have to say, like, I love being a 7 because life is an adventure. It's a journey. Like, I'm not on a place getting to a destination. I'm truly on the journey. And I like all the little detours because they've brought me to where I am today. So feels good. Makes me happy. And I like to do it with a glass of wine too. And that's so 7.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Shelly.
Yeah, honestly, I read the report. I'm like, well, who wouldn't want to be like this?
Yeah.
So, and I guess I'm just fortunate enough to hang out with people who kind of like the spontaneity and the adventure and the I don't know, the joy breeze of it all. It's cool.
Come to the 7 side. We have wine.
And good food and chocolate.
Yes.
We are a party.
It is. I mean, more is more, right?
Yeah, I'm like my 7 statement. I mean, like welcome to the party. Like just like let's just like welcome in. Let's have some fun, and yeah, like just yeah, what they all said.
Welcome to the party. I love it.
One of my sayings for years has been, you're going to be laughing about this in 5 years. You might as well get started now.
Yeah.
Oh, I may be borrowing that one. That was brilliant.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I want y'all to know, my secondary type is 7. So my first type is an Enneagram 3, which is, the motivation to be the best. But then I have a high 7 too, which is experience everything and have fun. So I'm seeing the world as, well, why not be the best at having fun, right? So I got that in me too. So I'm in good company, right? I'm competitive to have the most fun. I'm competitive to have the best experiences. So, and as Sarah was saying, when I read my Enneagram 3, I'm like, who wouldn't want to be the best? So be the best at having fun. Why not, right? Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. This was awesome. And thank you, viewers. I know I just want to encourage everyone, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you can visit more of my work at haydenlee.com. That's HAYDENLEE.com. And thank you, 7 panelists. This was very fun. Go out there, have fun, and experience it all. And we will see you all next time. Cool. Thank you, everyone.